What is up, Lorcanas? We are looking at our last card color, my favorite gemstone, steel. This will be the last video of my series of a newbie looking at all of the cards that are out currently. We are up to the Shimmering Skies expansion. I probably should have mentioned that in all the other videos besides this one. Regardless, this is my opinion on how strong these cards look from somebody who doesn't play Lorcana, but I do play Hearthstone. And look at certain synergies that they have within themselves and how they would probably work with other card colors. And once we look at these, we can really start theory crafting about what two colors would work well together, even though that seems like a very difficult task and is obviously the fundamental challenge of Lorcana is the availability of so many cards to build a deck out of, and the limitations of only being able to choose two colors. So let's get into it. Let's look at Steel's one-cost cards. Starting with Rudy, the Groove Disruptor. What a jerk. He is a 2-2. That is not very good. Mickey Mouse, Food Fight Defender. A 1-2 with Resist +1, so he can take one less damage. Probably not too bad of a card to play very early game because there's going to be cards on the board that can only do 1 damage, so Mickey can be a lot tougher against those ones because they wouldn't hurt him at all, right? And even if they did 2 damage, which would be sort of your average as well, he could take 2 hits from one of those guys. So probably stronger than it looks just to have this simple keyword on it. Happy, a lively night. We have seen dwarf synergy with other decks, not very much. So I feel like this is the only dwarf besides that initial deck we saw it in. I can't remember the color, maybe amber, that we've seen another dwarf in. So with Happy here, a lively night, he's a 2-1. Burst of speed. During your turn, this character gains evasive. So he's an early game trying to get rid of the other opponent's evasive players. With the dwarf synergy, he might be a little bit stronger than your average 2-1 with this keyword. Without that dwarf synergy, probably not very good. Food Fight, more Food Fight card art. Oh, an uninkable action. Your characters gain, they can exert and pay 1 ink to deal 1 damage to chosen character this turn. That's interesting, and I think if that's the sort of keyword we start seeing with Steel, we can see how Steel can fit into some other decks that are wanting to do small bits of damage to the opponents for synergy. But this by itself, for it's only a 1-turn action that you can do this, and you're still going to have to pay more ink to do the action that it wants you to, that it allows you to do, makes this feel like a very expensive card, and so probably not that good. Shield of Arendelle, an item. Deflect. If you banish this item, chosen character gains resist until the start of your next turn. That seems very expensive for an item that you're just essentially getting rid of whenever you use it. Aladdin, Resolute Swordsman, a 1-3, and that's it. Not very good. Could be a shift target, but otherwise not great. Triton's Decree, an action, uninkable. Each opponent chooses one of their characters and deals 2 damage to them. You could play this in a deck that has synergy with, you know, being able to either heal your own players or your characters rather, or wanting them damaged to get the synergy off of that, and obviously doing damage to the other team is good. Of course, your opponent gets to choose which character the damage goes to, so that's a big negative because they could put it on one that is beneficial to them too. So this is a bit of an expensive card just because the card itself would take up space, and I think you can find better cards for this. A Fortisphere item, resourceful. When you play this item, you may draw a card. That's fine. Extract of Steel. For 1 ink, you can banish this item. Chosen character of yours gains bodyguard until the start of your next turn. I feel like you're getting this little extra bonus to try to make this be better. I think only doing this for 1 turn is not ideal, obviously. And I'm not sure if that's strong enough to be running this item for just this ability. Minnie Mouse, a Funky Spelunker, a 0-3. While this character is at a location, she gets 2 strength. So potentially a 2-3, assuming you have location synergy. Without location synergy, she's obviously very bad. So I don't think you're probably playing this card just to have her be a little bit stronger when she's in a location, because a lot of times you're paying more to move her to that location as well. So are we looking more like that this would be at best a 2 ink cost altogether just to give her this extra strength? Probably. So probably not good enough. Robin Hood, Beloved Outlaw, a 2-2, and that's it. Not good unless you're looking for a shift target. Olympus would be that way. This is an action. Your characters get 3 strength while challenging a location this turn. This would only be good in a heavy location meta where you're really need to get rid of locations at certain points in the game, maybe early in the game. Otherwise, this card might not be anything besides something to ink if the other players don't have locations down. Here's our first location ourselves. Only got 3 willpower, not very much. Show me the way. Whenever character quests while here, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. So you're not even really gaining hand size here. And it gains lore itself, which is nice, but it's super weak. And you have to move somebody here to quest there to draw a card and then get rid of a card. So unless there is actually discard synergy, this is not necessarily that great of a thing to be even doing that often. And this is such a weak location that it's not going to last very long. So this seems right now at face value not very good. Tiana, Diligent Waitress, a 1/3. Nothing else going on, not very good. Last Cannon, an item. Arm yourself. For 1 ink, you banish this item. Chosen character gains Challenger +3 this turn. So some of these items are kind of just like a bad action, and they're a little bit better because you can hang on to them throughout the game until the time is right that you need them. But would you pay 2 ink to do a +3 Challenger at some point in the game? Probably not. So I'm not sure this item sees play. Captain Hook, a 1/2, and he has a Challenger +2. This could be an early game presence to attack other characters that they've got down early on. So a 1 ink, basically 3/2, is pretty good stats for 1 ink. So probably pretty good. And I know there's a lot of Captain Hook synergy. We've seen plenty of pirate synergies. So probably a pretty good 1-drop. And if you watch the Sapphire video, Sapphire had very weak 1-drops. So Steel would be a good way to bolster that sort of weakness in a deck like that. Goons, hired goons. Maleficent's Underlings, 2/2. Not very good. Simba, Future King, a 1/2. Guess what? When you play this character, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. So we saw that with that, what was it, an item? No, it was the Bayou, which had sort of a lot of work to do this play right here. So if you are wanting to do this action, Simba is obviously probably a better choice than that location, in my mind at least. And this could be a good way to get, a bad card out of your hand, and you're basically swapping it with a random one from your deck. And again, if there is a discard synergy for just getting cards out of your hand, maybe an item does something, this could be even better. Fire the Cannons, an uninkable, deal 2 damage to a chosen character. I think doing direct damage out of your hand can be pretty strong. We don't see, this is the last deck and we haven't seen a lot of cards that do this sort of action. So I think that makes it a bit better than average, just because this can be a way to attack characters that are unattackable because they're not exerted or something like that. So this could be a good way to clear a 2 health character that you're struggling to get rid of. Sleepy, Sluggish Knight, got another dwarf. He's a 0/4, but he's a bodyguard. A bit of a weak bodyguard, obviously, because he's just going to be soaking up damage before he gets knocked off the board without trading any damage with the attacking characters. If you're not able to buff his strength here, I just don't feel like he's worth playing. Kronk, Unlicensed Investigator, a 1/4 with a Challenger 1. So again, you're playing him basically to control the board, so generally he's going to be a 2/4. It just makes him a bit weaker when after he's attacked, he goes back to a 1/4. So is a 1/4 good enough for a 2? Maybe not. A 2/4 is obviously pretty good for a 2 when you think of the stats, but probably not strong enough to play regularly. Arthur Wart, okay. Why are we calling him Wart? From the movie? Just a 2/2. He has 2 lore, so this is about the earliest card we've seen that's doing 2 lore, but in general, this is just not very strong. Doc, a Bold Knight, another dwarf, a 1/3, Drastic Measures. When you play this character, you may discard your hand to draw 2 cards. He is uninkable, but this can be a good play to do, especially if you have less than 2 cards, right? If you have 1 card, then you're at least drawing a card. And if you have 0 cards, you're drawing 2 cards for such a low cost. So this also boosts the dwarf synergy because he's actually a good one to play, and that has not always been the case. So probably a decent card. Or you know what? If you had 2 bad cards in your hand, you could obviously swap them with 2 more random cards from your deck. So probably a pretty good card to play, especially if you have a deck that doesn't have a ton of card draw. Duck for cover and action. Chosen character gains resist +1 and evasive, so that makes them a bit harder to take out if you are trying to protect a strong character. I just don't think that this is strong enough to play as an action itself. Wouldn't be surprised if we see this on a higher cost character that will be more of a better card all around than playing this action. We have another location, the Seven Dwarfs Mine, the secure fortress. It has 6 willpower and it costs 2 to move somebody here. Mountain defense. During your turn, the first time you move a character here, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. If the moved character is a knight, deal 2 damage instead. It also produces 1 lore. This could definitely be a strong location to build around, especially if you're playing those dwarf knights. I'm going to guess there's more synergy with the dwarfs and possibly knights, so that you're more likely to have knight cards in your deck, which makes this a pretty strong card because you can just pay, you'd be paying 2 to move somebody here and just do damage to somebody else. And if they have location synergy themselves, then even better. But, you know, doing 2 damage here and there to characters that basically are just going to take the damage, aren't being challenged and doing damage themselves, can be pretty good and be hard to counter as the opponent. They've just got to watch their characters get blasted by the mine here. So I can see this location being pretty good. Argus, I guess, the Cyclops, a 4/1. 2 cost 4/1, not really strong enough, just a bit too weak here, especially when we're seeing cards that are doing 1 to 2 damage regularly. In some of these decks, could just be wiped out before he gets a chance to do his 4 strength. And even early on, that 4 strength might not even be that relative when a lot of characters don't even have 4 willpower to need 4 strength for. So just a bit too weak with this low willpower. Magic Broom, Aerial Cleaner. We've seen Broom synergy in other decks that have seen very good, so more brooms is interesting. This is a 2/3, winged for a day. During your turn, this character gains evasive. I think with the Broom synergy that has seemed pretty good, that this could be a better card than it looks like, just because it can fit into those Broom decks. So this is probably a good card. I think on its own, it's not that exciting of a turn, but with synergies, it's probably a lot better. Mickey Mouse, Standard Bearer, a 1/3, stand strong. When you play this character, chosen character gains Challenger +2 this turn. So I think he's a bit too weak for this power, and we've seen this kind of power just on items that I felt were too weak too, so I'm not sure if Mickey being a 1/3 is really enough to push this power to make this card something you're really trying to play regularly. It could be a good way to get some stronger characters off the board early game, but I think that's about it. Imperial Bow, an item. Within range, you exert this and pay 1 ink. Chosen hero character gains Challenger +2 and evasive this turn. This feels like a much stronger sort of item than some of these other ones that have done a bit of a similar thing. I definitely want this one over that one that you have to banish and it just gives the character Challenger 3, right? You can at least keep this on the board and regularly have a way to deal with evasive characters, and all you're doing is basically paying 1. So I could imagine that this would be a good way to have this on the board and not have evasive characters themselves, because a lot of times that evasive keyword makes them take some of the stats away to make it balanced. So instead, if you're just paying 1 ink to have a much stronger Challenger and evasive to make sure you can deal with the opponent's evasive characters, can seem like a good combo. Thebes, the Big Olive, it has 7 willpower and only costs 1 to move a character here. If you can make it here, during your turn, whenever a character banishes another character in a challenge while here, gain 2 lore. I feel like we've had this sort of ability before, but it was worded differently than this. I guess this is specifically during your turn, so you'd have to move a character here and then attack and banish somebody, which doesn't seem too difficult to do, especially with Steel, which seems to be a more of a character aggressive deck where you're trying to control the board, so you are likely to be challenging other players and banishing their characters, and this could be a way to gain lore while doing that, because obviously you're not going to quest with those characters you're challenging. So this could be a pretty decent location, I think, if that was your strategy. Kita? Probably Kita, right? Royal Warrior, a 2/3, just a bodyguard. A 2/2/3 bodyguard's not the worst. It's not great stats, but if there's a character that we want to protect early on, this could be good. I'm not sure we've seen that character yet, though, so that could be a problem for this this bodyguard. Mr. Smee, a bumbling mate, a 3/3 for 2, seems good. Oh dear, dear, dear. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted and you don't have a captain character in play, deal 1 damage to this character. So that's the weakness and why he's a bit stronger than average. He does also have 2 lore, so that's pretty decent for this cost. Obviously, you're going to be playing him in a deck with other pirates and with Captain Hook so that you, for one, aren't getting this negative. And there's other captains than Captain Hook as well, like some of those hero characters from Atlantis and stuff like that have the captain tag, so it's not just Captain Hook. So I don't think it's too hard to get this character out without negating his, having him do damage to himself at the end of the turn. And in that situation, he's actually a very good stats for this cost, so I can imagine him being a very good synergistic card. Razul, surprised we haven't seen him too much yet. The Palace Guard. He's a 1/3. Looky here, while this character has no damage, he gets 2 strength. So he's 3/3 for a hot minute. And that would be pretty good stats, but you're basically getting that for just 1 attack or 1 challenge, and then it's down to 1/3 again. So probably not good enough. Just not consistently good when this stat line is way worse than even like a 2/3. Ba-boom, an action. Deal 2 damage to a chosen location or character. We've had a similar card to this with that 1 unkable that just does 2 damage to a character. This one I think is a little bit worse than that one because locations are usually not your target for this sort of action. I think the chosen character is the main target a lot of the time. So we're paying more to do that. So I think it's a bit weaker. So I'm not sure it's worth the cost right for this one. Maui's Place of Exile. It is a 5 willpower and 1 to move location. Isolated. Characters gain resist +1 while here. That's pretty good. I think the resist keyword is a bit stronger than some of these other ones that get tacked on to random characters. And so putting everybody, basically you're paying 1 to give them 1 willpower in a sense. Well, not even that, because this just takes 1 damage away by whatever's trying to damage them. So it's not even just 1 willpower because the effect can be much more powerful than that. So yeah, I think this is a good location too. And another location, Nottingham, Prince John's Castle. It has 6 willpower, it generates 1 lore, and it also only costs 1 to move somebody here. This is just a location. There's nothing else going on besides this lore gain, so I don't think you would play this over these other ones. Cinderella, Knight in Training, a 2/2. Have Courage. When you play this character, you may draw a card and then choose and discard a card. We've seen that before. This is still a bit of a weak stat line for this sort of action. I don't really think I want to play a 2/2 at any point in time. So I'm not sure this character is strong enough for this cost. Hercules, Hero in Training, a 2/3, not very good. Jafar, Royal Vizier, a 3/2. I don't trust him, Sire. During your turn, this character gains evasive, so he's just an anti-evasive, challenging sort of card. Don't know if that's strong enough to be playing this early in, but we do know that Jafar has synergies as well as shift targets. And this isn't a terrible card, especially if you're trying to control the board early on. Robin Hood, a 1/3 uninkable. This is the capable fighter. Skirmish. You can exert this card to deal 1 damage to chosen character. That can be pretty good, honestly. He's only doing 1 damage himself, so more often than not, you would just be exerting him to do that damage instead of challenging him to keep him protected. And that could be what keeps some of their characters off the board and keeps them safe and keeps other characters safe. So it's a very interesting card. I think for this cost, it's not too bad too, because again, you're just doing 1 damage to chosen characters, which could be a character that is not even exerted as well. So he's got a lot of flexibility with his attack here. So this seems like a good card for a low cost. The Huntsman, Reluctant Enforcer, a 1/1. Change of Heart. Whenever this character quests, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. Okay, so we're seeing this ability a lot. I feel like we're going to see some sort of big synergy with it, because I don't think you just want to keep doing this over and over again. You're just kind of shuffling your deck a bit. But it's not a bad power to have, especially, and you don't have to do it, right? If you don't want to get rid of the card in your hand, then you just don't. And he does have 2 lore, so he's not bad. But I think you are playing him if this is a tactic you're trying to add to your deck. And I really feel like we're going to see some synergy with it at some point to where this makes it an even stronger play than just it by itself. Charge, an action. Chosen character gains Challenger +2 and Resist +2. So that's pretty strong. I just don't know if it's strong enough for an action. A lot of times I think the actions are a bit too expensive and they take up a card spot in your deck for very specific situations. I'd rather have a character attached to this, even if it's a weaker character. So I don't think this is strong enough. Pick a fight, a uninkable action here. Chosen character can challenge ready characters this turn. That's pretty interesting. That can be a real difficult thing to be prepared with, because you have your ready characters you think are safe, and then all of a sudden they're getting attacked by this card. It is very expensive and it is very specific, and the fact that you can't ink this means that it could get stuck in your hand and it never needs to be played throughout the game, so that's not great. If this was inkable at 3, it would probably be too expensive, so I think it's still too expensive here. Mouse armor item, an uninkable 2 here. Protection, exert this, chosen character gains resist +1 until the start of your next turn. That seems pretty good. I think the resist keyword is pretty strong, like I said earlier, and the fact that you can have this item out and constantly put resist on a certain character is probably pretty good. Aladdin, Cornered Swordsman at 2/1. Another kind of weak Aladdin card. He's not really getting too many abilities so far in Steel, and I think a 2/1 at 2 is just not really what you're looking for. Prince Eric, not a captain here. He seems to be captaining the ship, but he doesn't get the captain keyword, so he's a 1/3 with a challenger. So very similar to that Captain Hook, that's a 1/2. But I feel like this is a much weaker card because it costs 2 and he's only getting 1 willpower more than that Captain Hook. So this seems like a much weaker card than that Captain Hook. And it's not even a captain. So no way. That Captain Hook's way better. I'd play that Captain Hook over Captain Eric anytime. Break, action, banish chosen item. That's probably pretty good, especially if item decks are very strong. This is just a quick way to get rid of one of their items. And through these reviews, I've seen loads of really good items, so this could be a cheap way to get rid of them. So it seems like a decent card to have. Ransack, another action. Draw 2 cards, then choose and discard 2 cards. We've seen this attached to characters, plenty of characters so far, honestly, so I don't think you would just run an action that does the same thing that some of these characters in your deck could possibly do as well. So this seems like a weird card. I don't think this is good at all. Beast's Mirror item. Show me. Exert it and pay 3 ink. If you have no cards in your hand, draw a card. Obviously a very specific deck would have this in it, one that you don't have a ton of card draw, and then this would perhaps be your card draw. Very expensive though. I feel like we've seen items that draw you a card for cheaper than this. I'm not really sure, so this feels really expensive. I feel like you'd only have this in your deck if you were desperate for card draw and you were regularly running out of it. Having this item on the board would at least make sure you could always draw when need be. But I don't know, this seems very costly. Frying Pan, banish this item, chosen character can't challenge during their next turn. That seems very weak for such a small action that's going on, and especially for Steel, which seems to be a bit of a aggressive board controlling character deck. I feel like you would rather just do the damage to these characters rather than having an item that just at one time stops one of their characters from being able to challenge. That doesn't feel strong enough for me. We are on the 3s now. Simba, Lost Prince, a 2/4. Face the past. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may draw a card. I feel like this is probably more like the card draw you want in Steel, the ones that are doing challenges. And because you can kind of control your challenges to make sure you're banishing when you do challenge with Simba, you can probably get 2 cards out of this guy. So probably pretty good, especially early on when there's small health characters to be doing challenges with. So I can see playing this card for Steel if this is how you need to get your card draw. We've got some more dwarfs, and these apparently the Steel ones are all knights. Dopey, Knight Apprentice, a 2/2, not very strong for this cost. Stronger Together, when you play this character, if you have another knight character in play, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character or location. That's just not really very strong for how low his stats are here. And it requires you to have more knights on the board, which isn't impossible. And I would imagine if you're playing him, you're probably playing more knights in your deck. But I think in general, he's just too weak. Grumpy, a Skeptical Knight, a 3/1. Born of Resilience. While one of your knight characters is at a location, that character gains resist +2. Burst of Speed. During your turn, this character gains Evasive. We've already seen some synergy with that location with knights, and I think they gained 1 resist anyway. So those knights having resist +2 as well makes them very strong, especially early game when you're not getting loads of high damage characters on the board. So potentially if you had him out there and some other knights, they might be doing trades without taking any damage at all. So you could probably really control the board with some good knight synergies going on. And I would guess that this should affect him too, because it says one of your knight characters. It doesn't necessarily say one of your other knight characters, and he is a knight. So if he was at the location, he would gain that resist +2 as well, I am pretty sure. And so he could be pretty powerful, especially against other evasive characters. So this seems like a very good card when it comes to these dwarf knights. Pete, a wrestling champ, a 1/3 uninkable repeat. Exert him, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character named Pete, you may play it for free. Have we not seen this exact same card with different, obviously, name, but in another one? That Pete could also do this and get a Pete. So it looks like you could build a Pete deck and hope that you are drawing loads of Pete and playing loads of Pete's all at once, maybe, and just like high roll, putting down 8 Pete's on turn 3 or something like that. So I guess the high roll of this could be huge, but more often than not, you're probably just looking at the top card of your deck and not drawing it. So I'm not sure how strong this is. This feels very weak to me. Here is another Pete. So this could be a Pete that you do draw. Pete, the game's referee, a 3/3. When you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn. This feels like a very smart card to play when you know the other opponent wants to play an action or a song on that turn. So if there is say there's a 5-cost song that one deck just is dying to play and they always play it on 5, you play this before they can, and now you're slowing them down by 1 turn, which might be devastating to their strategy. So this is a smart card. You don't play this one willy-nilly, you play this one intentionally, which means you probably need to have a very good understanding of the decks that you're playing against to make sure you're playing this during a time that it's having a big effect on your opponent's strategy. So this could be a very difficult card to both play and play around as well. So seems like a very good card. When will my life begin? An action/song. Chosen character can't challenge during the next turn and draw a card. Pretty weak. It's got that typical draw a card to try to buff the whole general ability, which I just don't think is strong enough right here to stop somebody from for this cost. Even if you are drawing a card, it's just better just not to have this in your deck in the first place. We have a location, Badanon, a villain support center. It's got 7 willpower. It costs 2 to move a character here, and it generates 1 lore. There's no one I'd rather be than me. Villain characters gain exert and pay 3 ink to play a character with the same name as this character for free while here. Very interesting. I think if you are, say you are playing a heavy Pete deck, trying to get those card draw play for frees, so you've got loads of Pete's already, and then you could put a Pete in here and pay 3 ink to get another, maybe a larger Pete, because it says play a character with the same name as the character for free. So you could move a small cost character early game here, pay the ink, and then get a, like a 6-drop large Pete out right away. I can see the big plays that this could get you. It might be a heavy cost and sort of a tricky thing to do, because obviously you have to have that other character in your hand, and it needs to be honestly worth at least 3 to make this even worth bothering with, right? So this could be a way to cheat out a very high cost card. Otherwise, it's just probably not worth putting in your deck if that's not your strategy. Aladdin, Brave Rescuer. This is a pretty sick card art. This is a 3/3. Shift, you could discard a location card. I haven't seen that one before. Crashing Through. Whenever this character quests, you may banish chosen item. That seems pretty good too. So obviously, this is a shift card, but it's not very expensive, and it's kind of just got a good power, I think. So I don't think you necessarily are always trying to shift this card. I think just playing this 1/3 is fine. And when you quest, you might get rid of one of their strong items. So this is kind of a decent card at any point of the game, which I think raises its value just in general. So this seems like a good card. It seems like a good Aladdin. We haven't seen a good Aladdin in Steel yet, and this is the first one. Ariel, Determined Mermaid, a 2/4. I want more. Whenever you play a song, you may draw a card and then choose and discard a card. I'm not sure why it is adding this extra bit onto this power that we've seen like 3 or 4 times, where other cards don't need any condition to do it. And I don't think this 2-4 is like amazing stat line that you're like, oh, well, I'll sacrifice this having to have a condition for this. So no, doesn't seem good. Beast, thick-skinned, a 2-3, has resist +1. Not very, it's not bad, but probably just not good enough right now. It's not really exciting stats. Chi-Fu, Imperial Advisor. It looks like he's on the toilet or something. A 0-5, overly cautious. While this character has no damage, he gets +2 lore. That's interesting. This could be an early way to get some lore gain, and if you can protect him, he could be continued to get that lore going and going. So if you had a bodyguard out with this guy, I could see that being a pretty easy strategy to have him gain lore. Of course, he's got 0 strength, which means it's not going to be hard to get rid of this ability. So I think if we see any other 3s that have 3 lore, it makes him a lot weaker. But it doesn't seem like a terrible card right now, and you can easily protect him, I think, in the early game, that he could probably get you some decent lore going. LeFou, Opportunistic Flunky, a 2-3. I learned from the best. During your turn, you may play this character for free if an opposing character was banished in a challenge this turn. That seems pretty easy to do, especially with Steel that seems to have a very challenge-heavy character deck. So I would think more often than not, you can get this character out for free in probably the first turn you can challenge anybody if he's in your hand. And so like getting free cards out is awesome. So yeah, I can imagine this being a very easy card to add to your hand or your decks. Ling, Imperial Soldier, a 3-3. Full of Spirit, your hero characters get +1 strength. Probably not strong enough. Even in a hero heavy deck, probably not strong enough. I think even if this said all your characters get +1 to strength, it probably wouldn't be that good anyway, especially this early game sort of drops you're trying to put on the board. So it doesn't seem very strong. Luisa Madrigal, Rock of the Family, a 2-4. I'm the strong one. While you have another character in play, this character gets +2 strength. That's a very easy condition to meet, so having a 3-cost 4-4 is pretty decent. So I could see her getting put into some decks and doing some damage. One Last Hope, a uninkable song. Chosen character gains resist +2 until the start of your next turn. If a hero character is chosen, they may also challenge ready characters this turn. That's very interesting. I think the ability to attack ready characters can be a really interesting gameplay mechanic, because again, you're attacking characters that they thought were safe and might have a their strategy may be these characters are going to remain safe so I don't have to worry about them, and then all of a sudden you're playing these cards that are deliberately targeting those characters that were just ready, or denying. I guess you could attack no, it couldn't be an ink drying character, could it, because they aren't technically ready yet. But anyway, yeah, and plus getting that extra resist +2 could make this like a free trade for you without even taking damage, so that'd be good too. So yeah, this seems like a pretty good song. RLS Legacies Canon, Ba-boom. This is uninkable. Exert it and play 2 ink to discard a card and deal 2 damage to a chosen character or location. That seems very expensive. I feel like we keep seeing item. I guess this is an item that sticks on the board at least, but you would want to have some pretty decent card draw to be regularly discarding a card just to deal damage. It seems really expensive to me. I'm not sure about this one. Gustav the Giant, Terror of the Kingdom, a 6/6 for 3. Let's see what his weaknesses are. This character, all tied up. This character enters play exerted and can't ready at the start of your turn. Break free. During your turn, whenever one of your other characters banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready this character. Obviously, you're going to put this character in a deck where you're regularly banishing other characters. So it's probably not asking too much for you to make this character break free. And you only have to do it once. It's not like he has to continuously get broken free. So this seems like a really strong character. Helga Sinclair, Right Hand Woman, a 2/4. Challenger +2. I think we've seen this exact same card, haven't we? Just with a different character. So it would regularly be like a 4/4 when you're at least challenging. I think the other one was like a 1/3 or something. It could be strong, probably just not enough to be played by itself. John Silver, Greedy Treasure Seeker, a 3/3. Chart your own course. For each location you have in play, this character gains resist +1 and gets 1 extra lore. This could have really good synergy if you are playing more than one location. He would have, 2 resist and 2 extra lore, which can make him very strong early game. It might be like almost impossible for your opponent to do enough damage to him to actually get him off the board if you have 2 to 3 locations and they don't have any characters that are doing enough damage to him to even make a mark. So he could be really difficult to get off the board early if you've got the right cards, if you've played the right cards for it. Little John, Robin's pal, a 2/4 bodyguard. During your turn, this character gains evasive. Not necessarily what you want to see on a bodyguard. You want more the things that are giving you strength to the bodyguard. You don't necessarily want to be attacking other evasive characters with your bodyguard. You want him to just protect your weaker characters. So a bit of a weird ability added to this bodyguard card. So I think that makes it a lot weaker than it should be. Mickey Mouse, Stalwart Explorer, a 3/3. Let's take a look. This character gets 1 strength for each location you have in play. Not as good as that other character, the John Silver one we just looked at, that gets +1 resist and +1 lore for almost the exact same stats. So I don't think you would play Mickey over him, and I just think that makes Mickey a bit too weak. Nala, a fierce friend, a 2/4 with 2 lore and nothing else going on. Not a very strong card and kind of boring card art. Rise of the Titans, an action, banish chosen item or location. This could be pretty strong, especially in game or any point in the time. If they have a strong location or item, this can be a quick way to get rid of it. I think it depends on what the meta is about how often you are really wanting to get rid of an item or location, about whether or not you put this card in your deck. Captain Hook's Rapier, an item, uninkable. Get those scurvy brats. During your turn, whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge, you may pay 1 ink to draw a card. Let's have at it. Your characters named Captain Hook gain challenger +1. This seems pretty decent, especially for a way to get card draw going on. And I think if you are running obviously Captain Hooks, this makes them even stronger. And there's that 1 cost card that already does challenger +2. This would make him challenger +3 and make him a very heavy hitting 1-drop card. So I think this would be a good item to get down. It could be an easy way to get card draw for a very low cost. And if you're playing a deck that is doing a lot of challenging, it kind of makes sense to just have this item as well so that you can get that card draw going on. Gizmo's Suit, an item, cybernetic armor. Banish this item. A chosen character gains resist +2 on the start of your next turn. That seems a bit weak for just an item. I think we've seen better ways to get resist +2 than having to just have this banish itself. Seems very expensive. Map of Treasure Planet, an item. Key to the portal, you exert this and you will pay 1 less for the next location you play for their turn. That's pretty good. Show the way, you pay 1 ink less to move your characters to a location. That seems very good. So you're definitely putting this item out there with some of these location synergy cards. Like, no doubt about it. Seems very good. Binja, Guardian of the Dragon Gem, a 2/3. We have a choice. When you play this character, you may banish chosen item. That seems pretty good. It seems better than that item that does it, really, right? Or just that card that just banishes a chosen item. This guy can just do it, and then he has all of the bonuses of being a character. So I think I like this card, especially if there's decks with loads of items in it. This can be a quick way to do that. Lawrence, Jealous Manservant, 0/4 payback. While this character has no damage, he gets +4 strength. So I think if you're just looking at him as like a 3/4/4 with 2 ink, he's okay. It's pretty good, but the fact is he's only going to take, you just got to hit him once and he goes down to 0, and then he's an easy target. So I just don't think that he would be really worth playing right now. Got another broom, a magic broom industrial model at 2/3. Make it shine. When you play this character, chosen character gains resist +1 until start of your next turn. That's not massively good. It is nice that you can pick which character gains that. You could set up a combo with this broom, and I think there just is pretty good broom synergy as well, which makes it a little bit stronger of a card. So seems iffy. Prince Naveem, Penniless Royal, a 4/3 with nothing else. Not very good. The Prince never gives up. A 1/3 bodyguard, very weak bodyguard, has resist +1. Still think that's just a bit too of a weak of a bodyguard. At least he does lore for 2, and you will regularly just quest with him to make his bodyguard do the action, right? But again, he's a bit weak. Let the Storm Rage on, a 3-cost uninkable song. Deal 2 damage to a chosen character, draw a card. I think this is one of the few times the draw a card is actually attached to a pretty good action here. So to just sing with 3 and do, you're basically going to exert a character to do 2 damage to an opposing character, which is kind of like when you just challenge them anyway, except now you're not taking damage. Like, yes, is that worth a card in itself? In this sort of situation, it is, yeah, and also you're drawing a card, so you are kind of replacing this card if you're exerting this for free. So I think that this action kind of makes this card almost a free card to play as long as you have a character to sing it, which isn't asking that much for 3. So this feels like a card you'll probably have in most of your steel decks, honestly. Strength of Raging Fire, another song. Deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of characters you have in play. Very interesting card. And depending on your deck, this could be huge. This could be taking off very large minions because you have a very wide board. Who knows how many you have out there. If you've got 4 or 5 characters on the board and you play this, you could sing it for free. And if we're saying that singing a 3-cost song for 2 damage is good, you're probably not asking very much to have 2 on board, which I would still think that this is a good song to have in your deck. It doesn't draw a card to replace itself, so it has that negative to it, but at the same time, you can probably do more often. You're doing more damage than 2 when you're playing this. You might be doing a lot of damage, and you can do it to any character. So this seems like a very strong song. Weight Set, an item. Training, whenever you play a character with 4 strength or more, you pay 1 ink to draw a card. Another card draw item, and I think later in the game this will not be that hard of a condition to make, so again it's going to be another 1 ink to draw a card. If you have this in combination with those other items that usually you have to banish an enemy to draw a card, this looks like the way that steel draws cards a bit more consistently. You are still paying for it, but that's fine. Especially later in the game, it's going to be less of a problem to be able to afford this sort of action regularly. So probably not hard to get some card draw, and you always want to get card draw going on, so seems like a good item. Hercules, true hero, a 3/3, a bodyguard. I'd like to see bodyguards with higher health than this. This feels like a bodyguard that takes 1 shot and then he's no longer doing anything because he's dead. Kristoff, official Ice Master, a 3/3, that just does 2 lore. That's not really doing anything. Lilo, Galactic Hero, a 4/2 with 2 lore, probably even weaker than that last card, so not good. Tinkerbell, Tiny Tactician, a 2/4. Battle Plans, exert her to draw a card and then choose and discard a card. I'm not sure that is what you want to be doing with this character. I think there's so many other cards that do that as well. I just don't know how great this is to constantly be doing it regularly. You are kind of like picking the better cards of between 2, which we saw a lot with Sapphire as well. But without this discard synergy, you're kind of like making your deck smaller too. It's not just going to the bottom of your deck like with Sapphire or staying in your deck. It's actually discarding it. Unless we see a huge discard synergy, these cards seem a bit weak to me, so I'm wondering if there's like a 9 cost for every card you discarded, yada 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 sort of thing, which we'll probably see. But right now I'm not so sure about this card. Smash, deal 3 damage to chosen character just for 3 as an action. Probably not too bad. 1 ink per damage. If this was a song, it'd be a no-brainer as an action. I think it's a bit more dependent on specific character cards that doing 3 damage to them will be getting them off the board, because I think a lot of times you want to be getting characters with these sorts of things that you can't challenge, so like ready characters and stuff. So this seems a bit of an iffy action. It's getting a bit pricey for just doing straight damage to characters. Plasma Blaster, an item, uninkable. Quick Shot, exert this and pay 2 ink to deal 1 damage to a chosen character. That seems a bit expensive for this point in the game, so I'm not so sure about this one. I guess it could be good because it's just like a ping that you're paying all the time to do 1 damage here and there, so that could be powerful in a way. So maybe it's not too bad actually. On to our 4s, we've got Stitch and Uninkable here. The Team Underdog, a 1/4. Heave Ho, when you play this character, you may deal 2 damage to a chosen character. I think the uninkableness of this is just a bit too expensive for this like low stat line that you're not really doing anything else with. Especially if you get to 4 and you don't have a character that you're doing 2 damage to, that is very useful, because it's not as useful then, because then you're just holding on to him, and you don't really want to play this card at like 6 or 7 or whatever, because he's just so weak in his own character stats. Royal Guard, Bovine Protector, a 1/7. It's high willpower, but if he was a bodyguard, it'd be another question. Otherwise, I just don't think this is very good. Got another dwarf here, Sneezy, Noisy Knight, a 3/4 for 4. Headwind, when you play this character, chosen knight character gains Challenger +2 this turn. I don't really think that that's strong enough. It is, and it's also requiring knight synergy, not just any character gets that Challenger +2. So I just don't feel like that's strong enough as a card. Plasma, Unjustly Treated, a 1/4 uninkable. I'm warning you, during your turn, whenever one of your characters banishes a character in a challenge, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. And she gets 2 lore. That seems a much stronger card compared to that Stitch, obviously, because this is going to be doing 1 damage possibly multiple times, and depending on how long she stays on the board, consistently over your turns, if you are banishing regularly, you would be doing 1 damage here, 1 damage there, 1 damage here, 1 damage there, and she gets 2 lore whenever you want to quest with her. Bashful Adoring Knight, a 3/4. Impress the Princess. While you have a character named Snow White in play, this character gains Bodyguard. A little bit stronger of a character, and as a bodyguard, he at least has 4. If you don't have Snow White in play, you're not playing this character because he would just be a 3/4, which you're overpaying for at that point. So I'm not so sure about this guy. Unless you are playing a dwarf specific deck, that is definitely going to have Snow Whites in play. Plate Armor item. Well crafted. Exert this. Chosen character gains resist +2 on the start of your next turn. It's uninkable. This is a bit stronger than some of these other ones we've seen that are giving resist here and there, especially just actions. This could regularly, once you get this down, it is regularly putting resist onto a certain character for that turn, and the turn that even falls your opponent's turn as well, which makes it even better. So this could be a very strong item to get down, and if you can somehow cheat it down even earlier than 4 with, say, some sort of character that puts an item into play easier or makes it cheaper, even better. This could really make you do very favorable challenges. Donald Duck, Buccaneer, a 3/4. Boarding Party. During your turn, whenever this character banishes a character in a challenge, your other characters get +1 lore this turn. A lot of the times when you have something that gives all your other characters +1 lore, that can lead to huge lore gain turns if you set it up properly. And as a 3/4, you can probably set it up pretty properly, because doing 3 damage to a character, especially ones in steel where you can probably weaken ahead of time, to trigger this and have lots of characters on board can just be an easy way to gain lore. So I can see a Donald Duck being a strong character here. Mulan, Armored Fighter, a 3/6, has good stats, but just nothing else going on, so not good enough. Phil, a no-nonsense instructor, a 2/3. You gotta stay focused. Your hero characters gain Challenger +1. And Shameless Promoter, whenever you play a hero character, gain 1 lore. So obviously in a deck with lots of hero characters, or else he's not doing anything, which means you wouldn't play him at all. Your hero characters getting Challenger +1 isn't amazing, but you being able to for him to be a bit of a lore generator, if you have loads of hero characters to play, say you're playing him with a dwarf deck and you're constantly cheating out cheaper dwarfs and gaining lore for each one, he could be a good way to get a good chunk of lore without really having to do too much. So I can see him being a good character. Raja, Royal Protector, a 3/4. Steady Gaze. While you have no cards in your hand, characters with cost 4 or less can't challenge this character. That can be a really interesting card. I feel like if you're intentionally playing a deck where you don't have cards in your hand, that's not great, because then you're just decking regularly. And I don't know if Raja makes up for that sort of situation. This is a really interesting card. I just don't know if he's strong enough to be playing that strategy just to make him untouchable by characters that cost 4 or less. Yao, Imperial Soldier, a 2/5. Has Challenger +2, so when challenging he'd be a 4/5. Not really that great. Avalanche, an action, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. You may banish chosen location. And it's an uninkable 4 cost. I feel like if you don't have a location to banish here, this is not a good card. So it would really depend on how often locations are getting played, because dealing the 1 damage to each opposing character might not be too strong of a move. It would really depend on what the board state is and how much health those characters even had. So I'm not so sure about this one. I find them, I flatten them, a song, banish all items. This could be devastating if you're playing against somebody that has an item specific deck, especially if you don't have items yourself. Of course, if you are playing a heavy item deck, you don't want to play this and lose your own items. So obviously it really depends on the decks you're playing and the decks your opponents are playing, whether or not this card even has an impact at all. And then along came Zeus, another song. Deal 5 damage to chosen character or location for 4. This would be a very good card to sing, because again, you'd be doing 5 damage instead of using that character to challenge. And 5 damage is very often going to be enough to take out most characters that you're going to be running into. So I would imagine this card is regularly run in most steel decks. Beast, Forbidding Recluse, a 3/4. You're not welcome here. When you play this character, you may deal 1 damage to chosen location. That doesn't seem especially strong. Chosen character. Why did I say location? But it still does not seem that strong. Chief Bogo, a 2/4 uninkable. Insubordination, whenever you play a Floodborn character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. I don't think that's... Well, that's not... Okay, each opposing character is better. But again, if you're not playing Floodborn and this character is not doing anything, you really need to be putting them in decks you're shifting regularly enough to be triggering this. In which it's maybe okay. It's just very expensive for a 2/4 that with an action you may not even trigger. So I'm not so sure. Eli LaBouffe, Big Daddy. Who is this guy? He's a 2/5 with 2 lore. Not very good. Jafar as a giant snake. A Dreadnought, a 3/4. Could shift this onto your other Jafars for 2. Now, where were we during your turn? Whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may draw a card. Playing this at 4, it's not necessarily a great card to play. Obviously, shifting this makes it a much better card. So you definitely want to shift target for this. Namari, Morning Mist, a 2/4 bodyguard. This character can challenge ready characters. That's pretty interesting. That probably makes it worth this cost, the fact that you can attack. Again, as a bodyguard, I don't really want this character constantly attacking because I'd rather them defend my stronger characters than getting themselves damaged by challenging. So, not so sure. But it could at least be a threat to some of these characters that your opponent thinks are safe. Captain Hook, Captain of the Jolly Roger here, a 3/4 uninkable, double the powder. When you play this character, you may return an action card named Fire the Cannons from your discard to your hand. I believe that was one that did, 2 damage and seemed like a pretty good card. Obviously, if you're running that, you are going to be running Captain Hook, and he, of course, has other synergies. But yeah, getting that card back into your hand and then, using it again is obviously ideal with this combo. Donald Duck, Musketeer, a 2/5. This looks like a Warhammer character here. He is a bodyguard. Stay alert. During your turn, your Musketeer characters gain evasive. So that's probably a pretty good bodyguard. He at least has high willpower. And if you're playing a Musketeer deck, he's making your other Musketeers harder to challenge while on your turn at least. I guess that means that it's more like they can challenge other evasive characters, which is fine, But I think more importantly, he's a decently statted bodyguard for this cost. Hans, 13th in line, 3/3. Stage a little accident. Whenever this character quests, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. That's probably what you're kind of looking for more for these 1 damage abilities. Something that you can kind of do more than once, not just when you play him, not just when some condition is met, but just questing, which you're going to do regularly enough, and this could be a way to protect him. He's doing damage and getting you lore, so that's pretty nice. He doesn't have a ton of willpower, so he might not be hard. He might not last too long doing this ability, but you never know. You might be able to get a few damage out of him and rack up some lore as well. Musketeer Tabard, an item, a uninkable. All for one and one for all. Whenever one of your characters with bodyguard is banished, you may draw a card. I think you only play this if you've got loads of bodyguards. Otherwise, you might not be drawing that many cards, and it's pretty expensive otherwise. Haven't seen a ton of bodyguards with steel. We have seen a few in, I think it was Amber. So if you're not paying, again, this requires a lot of bodyguards to be worth it. On to our 5 costs, we have Hey Hey, the Protective Rooster. He is a 4/5. He's got bodyguard, he's got 2 lore. Those are okay stats, not anything too crazy, but if you're building a bodyguard heavy deck, you might put him in there. Snow White, Fair-Hearted, a 3/5 natural leader. This character gains resist +1 for each other knight character you have in play. So I'm guessing that means the more knights you have, the higher her resist is. So if you are running lots of knights, she could be very hard to do damage to. And if she's questing a lot with a high resist, she could be almost impossible to get rid of through challenges. She is uninkable, but I think if you're playing this card, you're trying to play Snow White to rack up some lore and be very hard to remove. Tug of War in action, choose one. Deal 1 damage to each opposing character without evasive, or deal 3 damage to each opposing character with evasive. This is definitely a card you're playing if lots of people are playing evasive characters. Otherwise, I don't think you want to deal 1 damage to each opposing character when this is such a hard-hitting card. It's very expensive though. I'm not sure I'm running this action. I know decks are regularly running lots of evasive characters. Qianpo, Imperial Soldier, a 4/7 bodyguard. This is a pretty good statted bodyguard. I think I like this more than that Hey Hey for sure. That Hey Hey just has 2 lore. I'd rather my bodyguard just be a bit stronger to last longer to protect my other cards. Li Shang, Imperial Captain, a 5/5 with 2 lore, not very good. Mickey Mouse, a Playful Sorcerer, a 3/4, could be shifted for 3 to steal, or not steal, but cheat 2 ink out. Has resist +1, which is good. Sweep Away. When you play this character, deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of broom characters you have in play. That seems great. I've definitely seen some great broom synergy from the other decks, and there's some brooms in this one as well. So you could definitely have a lot of brooms in your deck, have them in play, and when Mickey gets played, you could hit a character probably pretty hard for 3 maybe on average. And then, you know, he has resist, so it makes him a little tougher. You could quest pretty easily, and you could always shift him for get him out early, which is even better, right? So seems like a very strong card. Eeyore, Overstuffed Donkey, a 4/5 with resist. Not really a lot going on there. Pyros, the Lava Titan, a 5/4. Eruption. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready a chosen character. That's always a pretty good skill to have, or ability to protect one of your characters or have them act again after that. And I suppose with you could act again on Pyros, but you're probably looking for a quester or something of that matter to really rack up some big points. I mean, you're probably looking for to ready somebody that can do something a bit more powerful. Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood, a 3/6, could be shifted. Skilled Combatant. During your turn, whenever this banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. The Good of Others. When this character is banished in a challenge, you may draw a card. So some pretty good abilities here. And obviously, if you can shift him out, he'd be really good. It just seems like a decent card here. So yeah, probably pretty good to have in your deck. Beast, Tragic Hero, a 3/5, can be shifted. It's better this way. At the start of your turn, if this character has no damage, draw a card. Otherwise, he gets +4 strength this turn. Obviously shifted, he's amazing here for the stats. But this turn can be a really good way to draw a card if he's not damaged. And even if he just has like 1 point of damage, he becomes like a 7/4 or something. Like crazy kind of stats for this cost. So seems like a very good card to play. Simba, Rightful King, a 4/6, Triumphant Stance. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, chosen opposing character can't challenge during their next turn. A little bit of a shutdown play here. You banish one of their characters and then kind of make the other ones not be able, like, so if they had a strong character that was likely to challenge, you can just be like, that guy's not doing that. I just don't think generally that is that good of a play, and it might not be something you even want to bother with when you're having Simba on board. So I think that is just too conditional to bother with Simba when there's other stronger 5s out there. Thaddeus E. Clang, Metallic Leader, a 3/5. My Teeth Are Sharper. Whenever this character quests while at a location, you may deal 1 damage to a chosen character, and it's 2 lore. I think his stats are just a bit too weak for this. You're also going to have to move him to a location before you can get this power, and we've seen other characters that can deal 1 damage when they quest without having to be at a location, I think. So I feel like he's just a bit weaker, and this stat line is just a bit too weak for this card to be good enough, I think. Donald Duck, Deep Sea Diver, a 6/5, and that's not really good enough at this point. Li Shang, Archery Instructor, a 3/6. Archery lesson. Whenever this character quests, your characters gain evasive this turn. Not too bad. It makes your characters a bit harder to hit, but that hasn't really been, or again, this is just for your turn. This makes them able to challenge other evasive cards. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just not sure it is a tactic you really need to be focused on. So you might want to play stronger cards that have different synergies than this guy. I think if you are seeing loads of evasive characters in decks, he could be a lot better, and he's got a decent stat line for somebody that you're just questing with. Beast, Hard-Headed, a 4/4. Break. When you play this character, you may banish a chosen item. I'm not sure his stats are good enough for just this to be what's happening. I would only think you'd want to play this guy in a item-heavy meta, but then you're probably also playing that card that banishes all the items anyway, which would be a stronger play than having Beast out here just getting rid of 1 and then putting kind of a weak card out for this cost. So I think these stats are just a bit too weak for this. Captain Hook, thinking a happy thought and flying around. A 2/5 uninkable, can be shifted though, and is a challenger +3. I think this is the second shiftable Captain Hook we've seen. Stolen Dust, characters with cost 3 or less can't challenge this character. See, that's a bit... We had that other one where there was like a huge condition to make it so that characters of a certain cost couldn't attack. Captain Hook just kind of does it by existing, so Andy he's basically a 5/5 when he's attacking. I think this power allows you to have a bit more control over what you do with Captain Hook, and obviously if you shift him early, he'll be even better, and he probably wouldn't have any characters that'd be able to challenge him at that point. So yeah, it seems like another good Floodborne card. Cerberus, the 3-headed dog, a 5/6, not very good. Simba, Rifle Heir, a 3/5 uninkable. I know what I have to do. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 1 lore. That seems pretty decent. His stats are a bit low though. It's one of those things where obviously you want to be challenging with him, so why does he have 2 lore? I'd rather this lore be put on his stats somewhere else. And the fact that he costs 5 to do this seems very expensive to me. So I just don't think his cost is worth it. Starkey, Hook's Henchman, a 5/4. Aye, Captain. While you have a Captain character in play, this character gets 1+ lore. Obviously, you're putting him in those pirate decks with lots of Captain Hooks, so that he would probably regularly have 2 lore. Is a 5 cost, 5/4 with 2 lore good enough? It seems right on the line of stats that you'd be happy with. And I just don't know if he does enough for you to be putting him in your deck. A Whole New World, a song for 5 cost. Each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. I know this card is good. I know this card is in a lot of decks. And if you're Steel and you don't have very many cards in your hand, you're basically discarding nothing and drawing 7 cards, which is massive. And you're disrupting your opponents and making them draw 7 new cards. And if they were already a card heavy deck, say they have a lot of card draw, they have 5 or 6 cards in their hands anyway, you make them discard all of those and have to draw 7 new ones, can be very disruptive and could be part of a mill deck if those are viable. But yeah, this is a very good card, especially if you're singing it, because then you have 7 cards in your hand and however much ink still, you wouldn't have to have spent any ink on this one. You now have 7 cards to choose your plays with. Grab Your Sword, a song. Deal 2 damage to each opposing character. Another song, which means you can cheat it out with a character, and if you're going against wide boards, this could be huge. This could be a huge board clear, so this seems like a very good card. On to our 6s. Jafar, Tyrannical Hypnotist, a 0/7 but challenger of +7, so he can do 7 when he attacks. Opposing characters with cost 4 or less can't challenge. That makes him even stronger because that really makes it limited to how many characters can even try to challenge him, even if seeing how he has no strength when you are challenging him or when your opponent challenges him. And with this lore gain, obviously you questing with him when your opponent has no characters on board that cost 4 or actually cost more than 4 means he can basically quest without any threat. So that's very interesting. Could be a very good card. Simba, Son of Mufasa, a 3/5, can be shifted to save 2 ink. Fearsome Roar. When you play this character, you may banish chosen item or location. That seems to be the Lion King thing going on with Simba and Mufasa maybe. I can't remember which ones do which. Again, I think this depends on the meta. If your opponent doesn't even have any items or locations, this guy's doing nothing besides having these stats. So if you can shift him, great. If not, a 3/5 for 6 is very low stats. Steel Chromacon, a Steel Light uninkable item, very expensive. You exert it to deal 1 damage to chosen character. That seems too expensive for this point in the game, so I don't think so. Ariel, Sonic Warrior, a 3/8. Can be shifted for 4. Amplified Voice. Whenever you play a song, you may pay 2 ink to deal 3 damage to chosen character. Pretty good stats for this sort of card. Obviously, if you can shift it, huge stats. And if you've got a song deck going on, and you can regularly be doing 3 damage to chosen characters, could be a very strong card. Hercules, Beloved Hero, a 6/5 bodyguard with resist. Probably a pretty good bodyguard card just due to that resist. Basically, anybody that challenges him is probably going to get banished because he hits so hard. And plus, he's going to be pumping out some lore for you as well. So, could probably be a pretty tough bodyguard to get rid of thanks to this resist. And if you can get other cards to buff his resist even more, it could be very strong. Magic Broom, a brigade commander. I love this broom with armor and stuff on. He's 2/6. has resist +1. Army of Brooms. This kid gets +2 strength for each other character named Magic Broom you have in play. That could be loads of them if you're playing a Broom deck, right? So he could be a very heavy hitter. He has resist +1 to make him a bit sturdier. And he gets 2 lore, which is a little bit of a bonus, but you're probably trying to do more damage with him than anything. Yeah, this could be a very hard-hitting character in a Broom deck, so seems good. Hades, Hot-Headed Ruler, a 5/5. Call the Titans. Exert to ready your Titan characters. So this would be really good in a Titan heavy deck. I kind of forget what the Titans are. Just have to like look at them specifically to see if they're worth building a deck around. But if they are, Hades could be really good for getting them to do multiple actions per turn. Otherwise, his stats are pretty average, I suppose. Not great, but obviously he has a very strong power in the right deck. Little John, Resourceful Outlaw, a 4/5. Can be shifted onto 4. Okay, big shots. While this character is exerted, your other characters, or your characters with Bodyguard, gain resist +1 and get 1 to their lore. So obviously really good in the Bodyguard deck to make those guys even sturdier. We saw that Hercules, that was like a 6/5 that already had resist. So Little John could make him resist 2, even harder to kill, and give him 1 extra lore while he's at it. So yeah, I can see a Bodyguard deck being built around some of these steel cards for sure. And obviously you shift him early, it would be a huge play with these stats. Beast, Selfless Protector, a 2/8. Shield another. Whenever one of your other characters would be dealt damage, put that many damage counters on this character instead. So he's kind of a Bodyguard without the Bodyguard tag, right? He's just soaking up that damage, which is interesting because a lot of times when they do this, you attack whoever has the lowest strength because that's who's going to be doing damage. So if they had if you had a 1/2, you would just hit that 1/2 because you'd be taking less damage than hitting Beast. But yeah, he is just soaking up loads of damage as kind of a Bodyguard in a different name here, right? So probably pretty good. Hercules, Divine Hero, a 6/3. Can be shifted onto other Hercules, but probably not that other 6 cost, right? Resist +2. I feel like I like that other Bodyguard Hercules more than I like this one. Even this is a shiftable one. I think if you're not shifting this onto a lower cost Hercules, I don't know if I want to play 6 for the stats, even with resist 2, because he does still have pretty low health here. Yeah, I'm not so sure about this guy. Kronk, Junior Chipmunk, a 4/5, has resist +1. Scout Leader, during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may deal 2 damage to chosen character. That seems pretty strong. He's got okay stats, but with this resist makes him a little bit more resilient. Again, probably doesn't need this double lore because you're going to want to challenge with him to continue to do damage to other characters. That seems like a pretty strong power to have. Pacha, Village Leader, a 4/8. Good stats, but with nothing else going on, you're not going to play him. Kronk, Right Hand Man, a 6/6. And that's kind of it. That's really not good at all. Mickey Mouse, Musketeer, a 2/7. Bodyguard, very high willpower for Bodyguard. Your other Musketeer characters get 1 strength, so you'll definitely be putting him into a Musketeer deck. Makes everybody stronger, and he's pretty resilient with this high health. So yeah, seems pretty good. Tika, Heartless, a 5/5. Seek the Heart. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore. I'm not sure about this one. Is that really a strong character to be doing this just for 2 lore? It's kind of low statted. I guess it's because you're getting this for characters, which means you're probably not questing too much with Tika because this is going to be the main reason you're playing it, right? So I feel like if this had higher stats, it'd be a better card, but I think it might be too low statted to bother with. Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy, a 4/5, can be shifted for 4. Rock the Boat. When you play this character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. That's pretty good. We've seen cards that just do that by themselves, or you have to pay to do that. So just playing Tinkerbell, especially if you're playing on 4, could do a lot of damage real quick. And Puny Pirate, during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may deal 2 damage to chosen character. We've already determined that that's a pretty good thing to do. She doesn't have huge stats, but I think the combination of this makes her really powerful. And obviously, as always, shifting it makes it even better. It seems like a very good card. On to the 7s. Kronk, Head of Security, a 6/6 uninkable. Can be shifted for 5. You're definitely going to want to do that. Are you on the list? During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may play a character with cost 5 or less for free. That is huge, right? Cheating out a character at that cost would be great. Steal is not necessarily a deck that seems like you're going to have loads of characters in your hand, so maybe you don't even have a character to cheat out at this point, but you could build a deck that has more card draw so that this is always going to be hitting whenever you do banish another character, and at least he doesn't have lore because you are definitely going to be wanting to challenge with Kronk more than not. At 7 without shifting, very expensive though, probably not worth it at that point. That still could be worth it. This is a really good power if you can get a good strong character out for free. Sir Ector, Castle Lord, a 7/10 for 3 lore. And he's uninkable, but these stats are pretty good. He would be very difficult to get off the board, and you'd probably just sit there and quest with him until they could do 2 damage to him, or 10 damage. And he's probably wrecking anybody that challenges him. Is he good enough to be one of your uninkables? I'm just not sure, but I don't think you would hate getting to 7 and plopping this guy down. Arthur, King Victorious, a 3/6, can be shifted, otherwise he's uninkable. Knighted by the King, when you play this character, chosen character gains Challenger +2 and Resist +2, and can challenge ready characters this turn. So that's a very strong play, especially if you are specifically wanting to take out a ready character, and you're probably going to do damage to them without taking as much, obviously. I'm not sure you want to play this guy at 7. I think you want to shift him out. Otherwise, these stats are like really low for a 7 costs, and I'm not sure this is always going to be doing something you want it to do and making too much of an impact on the game at this point. So I'm not sure he's that strong of a uninkable card right here. Rhea, Unstoppable Force, 3/6, has Challenger +2 and Resist +2, so pretty hardy and a hard hitter. You gave it your best. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may draw a card, so one of those late game challenging card drawers. At least Rhea is mostly built around challenging and unnecessary lore, really, because you want to be doing damage with her and drawing cards, and obviously can really pick off some of these weaker characters that are out there while still doing high damage to pretty much anything. Doing 5 regularly is pretty high. Seems like a pretty decent challenging character for the later games. Mufasa, I feel like the Lion King characters are always just like in this exact same pose, just in different backgrounds. They're always just kind of like walking nonchalantly somewhere. Mufasa, Champion of the Pride Lands, a 3/10 with 3 lore for 7. I feel like I'd rather have that 7/10 uninkable at 7 than Mufasa here. Even if he does have the flexibility of being able to be inked, I don't know if I really care to play him in the late game. Simba, Fighting Prince, he's a 5/7. Step down or fight. When you play this character and whenever he banishes another character in a challenge during your turn, you may choose 1. Draw 2 cards, then choose and discard 2 cards, or deal 2 damage to a chosen character. I think with this guy, you're probably always doing this deal 2 damage. The fact of the matter, if you don't have good card draw and you're just drawing 2 cards and then choosing to discard 2 cards, you might just be drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards, obviously, so that's not ideal. But doing 2 damage to a character can be strong. I don't really feel like that's strong enough for a 7 with this stat line, though, so I don't think I really like this card that much. Cinderella, Stout-Hearted, a 5/5, can be shifted and has Resist 2 with 3 lore. The Singing Sword, whenever you play a song, this character may challenge ready characters this turn. So the shift would be pretty strong here. A 5/5 with 2 Resist can be pretty tough to fight earlier on than the after 7 drop time. Depending on how many songs you do, this might be useful, and you could obviously set it up to be useful turns. Like say you have Cinderella on board, they have a ready character, you can play a song whenever and attack that ready character, making them never really safe, and being able to hit for 5 is pretty high. So I could see her being pretty effective, especially if you can get her out earlier. We've got our 8 cost cards here. Gant2, Galactic Federation Captain, a 6/6 for 8. Under arrest, characters with cost 2 or less can't challenge your characters. So that freezes their smaller cost characters, but how many of those are really being on the board by the time you're playing 8 drops? I feel like those guys would be having way less of an impact at this point in the game, that you'd be wanting to give up stats and stronger abilities to play Gant2 here, so I'm not sure this is a very good card. Maui at an 8/8, just 8/8 for 3 lore, not really good enough. surely. And now we're on to the last three that are all 9 and above. Namari, Resolute Daughter, a 5/5. That's very low. What does she do? I don't have any other choice. For each opposing character banished in a challenge this turn, you pay 2 ink less to play this character. And she has resist +3 and 3 lore. So that's the mana cheat for Namari here. So if you could banish 2 characters in 1 turn, she would be a 5 cost, which is probably around the range you're looking for to get her out, 5 to 6 maybe, because that resist +3 is very strong. I'm not sure if we've seen a resist +3 as a base for another character yet. So she might be able to trade with a decent number of cards without even taking damage if they don't have more than 3 strength. And you could just put her out and start lowering for a lot if they have a lot of weaker characters on board that wouldn't be able to get past this resist +3 in their challenges. But again, you're going to have to set up the plays to get her out early. And you know, if you could banish 3 characters on 1 turn and you have Namari in your hand, you would be paying 6 less. So she would be a 3 cost, which is pretty crazy for this stat line. So I can imagine it's not too difficult to cheat Namari out at low cost, and then she becomes a very difficult character without a damage from the hand or an item or, you know, something that banishes a character. But that just makes her kind of like a target, right? Which isn't the worst thing. Protects your other strong characters. The Mob Song, a sing together 10, otherwise it's uninkable 10. Deal 3 damage to up to 3 chosen characters and or location. So you could potentially do the 9 damage to 1 character because it says to up to 3 chosen characters, which means it could be 1, 2, or 3. So it's basically do 3 damage 3 times to anything. I think with Steel, it does seem like the strategy is to get some strong characters out on the board more than just 1 or 2. So being able to sing that 10 sing together would be probably a good way to get some characters off the board, do a lot of damage without having to challenge yourself. So I can see this being played in certainly decks that you intend to have enough characters to sing this song. Otherwise, it's a very expensive song, and I don't think you'd pay 10 for this. So this seems like either a sing or don't play. And last but not least, well, it could be least. I actually don't know. It could be least. Goofy, Night for a Day, a 10/10. That's massive. Haven't seen anything like that yet, have we? And he has 4 lore. So yeah, that seems like a very strong, obviously very late game card, but it is inkable. So if you couldn't play it, then you could just ink it. But boy, you really need to get your ink up to be playing these 9s like this, right? I wonder how often people are playing Goofy regularly, or if the games just don't last that long. Because if you can get him down, he's going to be very difficult to get off the board. But I'm not sure if people are just playing huge statted minions with 4 lore like this, or if the game's already over by this point. So I'm not sure. Probably not necessarily getting to the point where your Goofies are getting played. But that's Steel, and that's the last of all of the cards so far that have been released in October. We are now in October 2024. Steel very obviously seems to be a deck, or at least a color, that is doing a lot of challenging. There are challenge synergies, banish synergies. Had some early game items, but then they sort of started disappearing after we got to around 3 or 4. And I'm not sure the items or the locations were super strong. Oh, I think I missed this one. Did I read the wall? Oh, I think I must have missed this one. It's a 4 cost, 8 willpower, cost 2 to move there, protect the realm. While you have an exerted character here, your other locations can't be challenged. I think if you're building a location deck, then obviously this is a good one to continue to protect those maybe better locations. But boy, it seems hard to get your locations to stay alive because they can always just be targeted without being able to defend themselves. So we also saw some knight synergy with these dwarfs and just other knights, I suppose. And I think they had a pretty good location that made the knights even better. So you could see some knight decks being made. Got some more Peats, some strong Peats, and then some similar Peat drawing Peats up here with Wrestling Champ. So you could go with a Peat deck. Have more Captain Hook and Pirate synergy. And what I was expecting was a discard synergy strategy, but that never came to fruition. Just a lot of cards that you draw a card and then discard a card, so a bit of cycling going on, but nothing, there was no payoff for that, which I'm honestly a bit surprised about. But I think with Steel, you're seeing strong characters that are able to control the board and try to make it to the late game to put down some very strong characters that are able to gain lore to win you the game. But seems a bit more board control-y, especially with the direct damage abilities and some of those songs that do damage to the entire. It seems like it might be a way to deal with wide boards that other colors don't have. So that's all the cards looked at and reviewed from somebody who doesn't know what's going on. Next, it's time to figure out how these cards go with other cards to form decks and then play them against other people. And finally play Lorcana, I suppose. So there may be Lorcana updates in the future. I hope you enjoyed my card reviews and that they were helpful. Until next time, adios.